Fred Rogers was much more than a kind television host. He was a man of principle who stood his ground. In 1984, when Burger King aired a commercial featuring a Mr. Rogers lookalike promoting burgers, Fred made a single phone call and the ad was pulled immediately. When the Ku Klux Klan used his voice for racist messages aimed at children, he didn't just express outrage, he took legal action. But there was one boundary even Fred wouldn't cross. When pressured by producers to betray his values for ratings, he did the unexpected. He walked away. Let's start from the beginning. Fred Rogers was born on March 20, 1928, in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. His family was well off. His father was a successful businessman, and their home was filled with toys, books, and music. Yet despite these comforts, Fred didn't feel fortunate. Chronic health problems, including asthma, often confined him indoors while other children played outside. From his window, he watched them, feeling deeply isolated. That loneliness carved itself into his soul and became the source of a profound empathy he would later use to help children feel understood and loved. Fred's asthma kept him housebound for weeks at a time. His mother tried to comfort him by sewing puppets and playing piano, but the solitude weighed heavily on the shy boy. He rarely spoke up in class or made many friends, but in the quiet, he became a careful observer of human emotions, joy, sadness, fear. This sensitivity allowed him to connect with millions of children later in life in a way that felt deeply personal. At about age 11, Fred had a defining experience. Some neighborhood boys began calling him Fat Freddy, chasing him for 11 blocks, laughing and yelling. Humiliated and scared, Fred carried that pain with him, but it gave him purpose. He later addressed bullying on his show, not from afar but as someone who had lived through it. He encouraged kindness and taught children how to stand up for themselves. One person who made Fred feel truly loved was his grandfather, Fred McFeely. Every Sunday, Fred visited his grandfather's farm, a place where he could run free and be himself. His grandfather's words, "Freddie, you make my day special just by being you," gave Fred strength when he felt unseen. Years later, he honored him by naming a character on his show Mr. McFeely. High school marked a turning point. Though still shy and overweight, Fred's life changed when a fellow student, Jim Stumbaugh, befriended him. That act of kindness helped Fred break out of his shell. He got involved in school activities, discovered leadership skills, and by senior year was elected student council president. He participated in music, theater, and public speaking, lost weight, gained confidence, and began to believe in himself. This transformation showed him the power of friendship and compassion. Fred started college at Dartmouth in 1946 but transferred to Rollins College in Florida after 1 year. There, he found his passion, music. He composed over 200 pieces and graduated magna cum laude in 1951 with a degree in music composition. His senior project was a piano sonata, but the music he wrote later became the emotional language of his television work, helping children understand complex feelings through song. That same year, a trip home changed everything. Fred saw television for the first time, a show full of slapstick comedy and chaotic humor. Instead of laughing, he felt disturbed. He thought, "This could be something beautiful, why is it wasted?" That moment was a turning point. Fred decided to enter television, not for fame but to help children. That black and white screen revealed media's power to influence and teach. In 1951, Fred moved to New York City and worked at NBC behind the scenes on shows like Your Hit Parade and The Voice of Firestone. His tasks ranged from managing props to helping with live productions. Despite learning a lot, Fred disliked the commercialism and fast pace of network TV. The advertising and lack of heart made him uneasy. This experience solidified his choice. He didn't want to chase ratings. He wanted to nurture children's hearts. In 1953, Fred left NBC and enrolled in seminary in Pittsburgh. He studied child development under Dr. Margaret McFarland while also exploring psychology and spirituality, a unique blend that would shape his future show. He prepared to reach children in a way that truly mattered, combining media, psychology, and faith. Fred returned to Pittsburgh and joined WQED, the first community-funded educational TV station in the U.S., which launched in 1954. With little budget but big ideas, Fred worked as co-producer, puppeteer, and even played the organ live during broadcasts. He created puppet characters like Daniel Striped Tiger, King Friday 13, and Lady Elaine Fairchild, many named after real people in his life. Originally, the show introduced short children's films, but Fred transformed it with storylines and rich personalities. The Children's Corner won the 1955 Sylvania Award for Best Locally Produced Children's Show and aired nationally on NBC. Still, Fred avoided the spotlight, letting puppets and music speak. While working full-time, Fred also attended seminary classes during lunch breaks, a grueling schedule he maintained for 8 years. He juggled studio work, travel, and studies without missing a beat. But he never planned to become a traditional preacher. His mission was to use television to uplift children's hearts. In 1963, Fred was ordained as a Presbyterian minister, but not to lead a church. His ordination was to minister to children through television. This innovative recognition showed how the church valued his unique role, reaching millions without steeples or pews. That same year, Fred traveled to Canada to produce Mr. Rogers for the CBC, a 15-minute show where he appeared on camera for the first time. Encouraged by CBC executives, he overcame shyness and shaped the gentle, direct style he became known for. He began building the neighborhood of make-believe, the imaginative world that would later become his signature. Returning to Pittsburgh in 1966, Fred teamed with WQED and combined Canadian show elements with fresh ideas focused on real-life emotions. The program aired locally at first until the Sears Roebuck Foundation provided funding. On February 19, 1968, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood went national on NET, later PBS. Unlike other children's shows that were loud and fast-paced, Fred's show was slow, peaceful, and safe. It became a national institution, running for over 30 years with nearly 1,000 episodes. Each episode began with Fred walking through the door, singing his theme song, and changing into a cardigan and sneakers, a comforting ritual that made children feel secure and accepted. The sweaters, mostly hand-knitted by his mother until her death in 1981, became iconic symbols of warmth. Interestingly, Fred was red-green colorblind and actually wore green cardigans more often than red. On May 1, 1969, Fred testified before the U.S. Senate to oppose cuts to public television funding. President Nixon had proposed slashing the budget from $20 million to $10 million. Calmly and with conviction, Fred explained how his entire show cost only $6,000 a year, less than 2 minutes of cartoons. Quoting a song lyric, he spoke from the heart. Senator John Pastor, known for his tough demeanor, was visibly moved and declared, "Looks like you just earned the $20 million. That moment not only saved PBS but proved the power of a gentle voice. Just days later, on May 9, 1969, Fred made another quiet but powerful statement on his show. He invited actor François Clemmons, a black man playing a police officer, to share a foot bath with him. This simple act of inclusion challenged racial divisions at a time when public pools were battlegrounds in the civil rights movement. Fred continued to take bold stands. In 1984, when Burger King used a fake Mr. Rodney character in an ad, Fred's single call shut it down. When the Ku Klux Klan used his voice for racist messages, Fred took legal action. Yet, when pressured to compromise his message for ratings, Fred refused and walked away. Fred Rogers didn't just entertain children. He changed how the world understood kindness, empathy, and emotional honesty. His legacy lives on in the countless people who choose compassion and love over cruelty. When you face difficult moments, ask yourself, what would Mr. Rogers do? And then do it. Fred Rogers knew exactly who he was and what he stood for. No fame, money, or influence could change that. In a small pool, Fred Rogers and Officer Clemmons once shared a quiet moment. Public pools were still segregated in many places, but Rogers didn't preach or scold. Instead, he simply showed compassion. They sat together, shared the water, dried off with the same towel, quietly making a statement that everyone deserves dignity. Years later, Rogers washed Clemmons's feet in private and said, "Thank you for everything." That simple act remains a powerful, silent stand against racial injustice. As Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood expanded nationally in 1968, its influence grew steadily. By the mid-1980s, it reached nearly 1.8 million homes and held a significant ratings share, a remarkable achievement for a public television program. Fred Rogers crafted every episode himself, writing scripts, creating puppets, composing over 200 songs and 13 operas. He wasn't just the face of the show, he built it from the ground up. Even after new episodes stopped airing in 2001, reruns continued, cementing the show as one of PBS's longest-running programs. But Rogers grew increasingly troubled by the direction of children's television. He believed many shows prioritized selling products over nurturing emotional growth. "A child is appreciated for what he will be, a great consumer someday," he said critically. He refused to sell products through his platform, even taking action when Burger King aired a parody commercial using his likeness. Unlike others, Rogers stayed focused on children's emotional well-being, often clashing with TV executives. His values extended beyond people. He became a vegetarian in the early 1970s, explaining, "I don't want to eat anything that has a mother." Inspired by Diet for a Small Planet, he saw vegetarianism as an act of respect for life. On his show, there were no scenes of people eating meat, and he even wrote a song criticizing dying baby chicks for Easter. His empathy was all-encompassing. Fred Rogers did what few children's TV hosts dared. He tackled difficult topics head-on. Just 2 days after Robert F. Kennedy's assassination in 1968, he aired a special episode to help children understand the tragedy. The puppet Daniel Striped Tiger asked, "What does assassination mean?" Rogers answered honestly and simply. Over the years, he addressed themes like war, death, divorce, and racism, helping children navigate a complicated and sometimes frightening world. He believed facing scary topics made them less overwhelming. The heart of his show was a belief in emotional honesty. Rogers reassured children that every feeling, anger, fear, sadness, was valid. "Whatever is mentionable can be more manageable," he said. To ensure sensitivity and accuracy, he worked with child psychologists, making sure the show reflected children's real issues. He didn't just tell kids they were special. He taught them how to understand and express their emotions, reminding them they were loved simply for being themselves. Despite his calm, gentle presence, the Mr. Rogers set was often lively and full of laughter. Between 1985 and 1990, the crew played pranks and joked around. Once, Fred came in singing and tried to put on shoes that were far too small, a prank by a crew member who swapped shoes. Fred laughed along. Another time, a crew member placed an inappropriate photo where Fred would find it. Instead of reacting harshly, Fred enlarged it into a giant poster and gave it as a Christmas gift to the prankster. That joy and warmth defined the show. After retiring in 2001, Fred said he missed his playmates the most. Though the neighborhood was a TV set, it was also real, filled with love and fun. In 1985, Fred stepped away from his usual role to introduce the musicians behind the scenes. Johnny Costa on piano, Joe Negri on guitar, Carl McVicker Jr. on bass, and Bobby Rawsthorne on percussion. These were skilled jazz professionals who played live jazz on every episode. Johnny Costa never used sheet music. He followed Fred's cues. This spontaneity added authenticity. When Fred introduced the musicians, he didn't just name them. He showed kids how each person contributed to the show's magic. It was a rare moment of transparency on children's TV, but Fred believed kids deserved to know who helped make their world special. His quiet message was clear: every person matters. Fred Rogers was an ordained minister, though his show never preached or mentioned God. His message was deeply rooted in faith, love, kindness, patience, and listening. Since public broadcasting rules required secular content, Fred found ways to weave his beliefs into every episode without breaking the rules. He addressed death, divorce, and racism not with fear but with compassion. Every child and guest was treated with respect. That consistent kindness was how Fred lived out his faith, quietly without preaching. Surprisingly, Fred was a lifelong Republican. Though that might seem at odds with his message of acceptance, Fred cared more about people than politics. He defended public broadcasting and stood up for the vulnerable. Some conservative critics later accused him of making children feel too special, but Fred never wavered. His wife, Joanne, said Fred's values were the opposite of Donald Trump's and speculated he might have changed parties had he lived longer. Regardless, Fred's actions spoke louder than his voter registration, showing compassion beyond political lines. One of Fred's closest friendships was with François Clemmons, the actor who played Officer Clemmons. Fred cast him in 1968, making François the first black man with a recurring role on American children's TV. Their bond was almost like family. But there was pain too. When Fred learned François was gay, he asked him to keep it private. In that era, being openly gay could ruin a career, and Fred feared for the show. He even encouraged François to marry a woman, which he did, though the marriage ended in divorce. Years later, Fred apologized and embraced François' partners, continuing to support him. Though Fred never spoke publicly about LGBTQ+ issues, his actions, casting François, sharing a foot bath on air, standing by him, quietly conveyed love and progress. Not all threats came from inside the show. In 1990, the Ku Klux Klan circulated tapes with a fake Fred Rogers voice spreading hateful racist messages, disguised as Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood episodes. These tapes were distributed in schools aimed at children. Fred was devastated. His company acted swiftly, and a federal judge ordered the Klan to stop and surrender the tapes. Fred used the law forcefully, not for himself but to protect children from hate disguised as kindness. Fred was often parroted. Eddie Murphy's Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood was a famous example, and Fred took it as a loving joke. But he drew the line when Burger King aired a commercial with a fake Mr. Rodney promoting burgers. One polite call from Fred ended the ad quickly. When a t-shirt showed Fred holding a gun, he took legal action. Fred wasn't concerned about being mocked, he cared about trust. Children trusted him, and that trust meant everything. Fred Rogers passed away in 2003, months after a stomach cancer diagnosis. He was 74. The nation mourned not just a TV host, but a symbol of empathy, grace, and quiet strength. His funeral drew thousands, but his true legacy is seen in the millions who grew up with him. He left no empire, flashy buildings, or mass merchandise. Instead, he left a blueprint for kindness. The world he built wasn't plastic or a set, it was inside the hearts of those who watched him, who felt his genuine care through a TV screen. Years after his death, his message grew stronger. In moments of national pain, people turned back to Fred's words, especially his famous line. "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers.' You will always find people who are helping." That simple truth has comforted millions, reminding us there is good even when the world feels dark. In 2018, the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor? Renewed interest in Fred's life, offering a moving portrait of a man who truly lived what he preached. 2019 movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood starring Tom Hanks captured his essence, not just mannerisms but soul. No film or documentary can contain Fred's legacy. It lives in everyone who chooses kindness over cruelty, listens rather than shouts, and values people simply because they exist. Fred Rogers didn't just host a show, he started a quiet revolution. One that said vulnerability is okay, feelings matter, and real, unconditional love is necessary. So next time you see someone struggling, ask yourself, what would Mr. Rogers do? And then do it.